India and Pakistan, the two countries voted most likely by the rest of the world to start a nuclear war. And last week, when the two of them were trading military blows, we all came closer to that reality. Welcome to the global game, where we are covering a very specific segment of the recent India-Pak conflict, where we are exploring why did Pakistan attack India so brazenly and what might be the hidden global players behind its actions. While the India-Pakistan conflict has been ongoing since Indian independence in 1947 and the formation of Pakistan, on the 22nd of April 2025, the conflict heated up again when there was a terrorist attack in the Pahalgam area of Kashmir, which targeted innocent tourists, especially identifying them from their Hindu religion. This triggered massive protest and outrage in the country, with the Indian government choosing to respond by striking terror targets deep within Pakistan. Now, that is the story that you're all aware of, but we are not focusing on that today. We are focusing on what happened after that. When Pakistan was hit with these strikes, it was given a clear message by the Indian government that despite the attacks being inside Pakistan, they were on designated known terror camps where terrorists were being trained. And Pakistan, being a country that also complains it suffers the might of terrorism, had a few options on how to respond here. But the events that unfolded over the next few days clearly show us that the Pakistan that responded was a very brazen Pakistan. It was a very bold Pakistan. It was a very escalatory Pakistan. Because despite knowing that any attacks towards Indian civilian or military targets would get an Indian response, Pakistan continued to make them. Now, let us not mistake, Pakistan may be a nuclear power, but it is not at par with the Indian military. It's not a near peer power of the Indian Armed Forces. The Indian Armed Forces are widely recognized to be the fourth best and largest in the world. Pakistan makes some lists at around 12 or 13, which is also being generous, and they're only there because of their nuclear power. On conventional power alone, they would not be that high up. Now there is well documented evidence, and analysts agree across the world that it was the Indian Armed Forces which won this engagement, both defensively in shooting down Pakistani attacks across a lot of cities, with some reporting over 3 to 400 Pakistani UAV and missile incursions, which were successfully defended, while at the same time also striking precision targets at Pakistani military and air bases and damaging various command and control structures. Now, this level of difference in verified attacks clearly shows that the Indian military has a big advantage over the Pakistani. Then why did they attack so? And this advantage is not just limited to the military space. The Indian economy is gigantic compared to Pakistan's struggling economy, which regularly needs bailouts from the IMF and other world agencies. In fact, even during the conflict, Pakistan had to get an emergency loan of $1 billion, which was later increased to have another tranche. But $1 billion for India is chump change. Any small Indian company is making $1 billion in profits in a quarter easily. So why did Pakistan act so brazenly? And most of the reasons are not originating from inside Pakistan, and that is what we are exploring today. There are a lot of global players that could be at play behind all this. The first one that we're going to start with is China. The Chinese have a whole host of reasons on why they would want to stoke an India-Pakistan conflict. And there are your usual contenders which have always existed, like Chinese military support to Pakistan and Chinese investment and debt in the region, and we'll come to those. But I feel in the last 6 months, something more drastic has changed, especially when it comes to India and China, which is forcing China to have a more aggressive stance towards India through its proxy forces. And now I'll explain that. You see, in the last 6 to 8 months, there have been many companies which have announced that they will be moving manufacturing out of China and into India. Now, this is something that the Indian government has wanted to do for a long time, and with all the supply chain issues, with the tariffs, with the China's labor issues that have plagued them, it created an environment that India became the ideal destination for manufacturing high-end goods. And that is harming the Chinese economy. And now, what is the best way to get that manufacturing back to China? That is to make India be an undesirable place because it's stuck in a conflict where rockets are being fired every night, there are blackouts. Now, these are signs which investors run from. Nobody wants to invest in a high end manufacturing plant if the country is not stable enough to continue manufacturing. So that is why India's stability and rise as a manufacturing destination is something which gives China just the reason to stoke the flames on an India-Pakistan conflict. The next aspect of why China would want to do this is very simple. It is to weaken India's military advantage. Now you see there are only so many missiles and air defense systems and jets that a country can have. Now India is in a tough position where it has two hostile neighbors on its borders, one being China and one being Pakistan. While Bangladesh has also stroked recent diplomatic uproar with some comments regarding their acting prime minister mentioning taking some of India's territory if India attacks Pakistan. Now, such comments only show us that not only are they meaningless because Bangladesh, being such a small country, would never be able to do anything against such a military powerhouse and a nuclear power like India, but it shows that the sentiment in the subcontinent is often against India. And that is why any military engagements that India has with any country like Pakistan or Bangladesh, these help China because it takes away military power from the Indo-Chinese frontier, giving them a clear military advantage. There was an incident a few years back in the Galwan Valley where many Indian soldiers and Chinese soldiers lost their lives over the line of actual controls position. And while there has been de-escalation on that, it's safe to say that an India versus China arms race would always continue to happen because no country would want the other to have too big of an advantage fearing a military attack. China may have a better and stronger military today, but India is trying to match it, trying to grow at a pace where the advantage doesn't become so significant that it gives them a decisive advantage in combat. The next reason is more usual, which is that the Chinese have massive amounts of investment in Pakistan, especially part of the CPEC, which is the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor. That is very important to China from a geopolitical point of view because it gives them access to the Arabian Sea and into the rest of the world markets without actually crossing the long shipping lanes of the Malacca Strait, which can be easily choked off. Now, this is a Western foreign policy solution that has been applied to China for decades, where they have been hemmed in with clear and vulnerable shipping lanes, especially in the Strait of Malacca and in the surrounding areas. These straits are so narrow that they can be blocked off immediately with a small naval force, and the Chinese depend on these straits for 80% of their energy imports and a large share of their exports. Now you see why China would really want another alternate route into the world markets in time of war. So the CPEC and the $26 billion debt that China has given to the Pakistan government are very good reasons for China to want to defend Pakistan and back him. And now these are the reasons. And I would also like to highlight that there has also been some evidence of Chinese involvement and action in the India and Pakistan conflict which just ended, because the Chinese Global Times, which is their mouthpiece for the world, which is it's kind of like their press release agency of the government. They made a wild claim that Pakistan used hypersonic missiles to shoot down Rafale planes, and this was a claim which was quickly analyzed by everybody, and it was found that it's fake because not only does Pakistan not have any hypersonic missiles, they don't have any means of launching them. It's an absurd claim. Now the only thing that you can think of is they were trying to cause fear and panic in India and hoping that Pakistan gets some strategic advantage. Now this kind of misinformation campaign coming from a third country shows that they certainly have some level of involvement and they're trying to shape the narrative to suit them. Another reason why they are doing so is because Pakistan operates mostly Chinese made military hardware these days. And if the Indians keep blowing them out of the sky, especially using Russian rockets, which are, a Chinese competitor, that gives them a really, really bad showing. So, China has many, many reasons as to why to stoke this conflict, and they are appearing to do so even though from the shadows. But let's just hope that the principles don't guide the proxies in such a way that it eventually leads the principles to go to war with each other, because that would be a big, big conflict. But nevertheless, those are the facts as to why China would support Pakistan be so brazen against India despite the risk of nuclear war and global outrage, and why they might continue to do so in the future. Now, the second aspect that I think we should look at is the global deep state. Now, there are those that deny that a deep state exists, and there are equally those that say that it happens. For those of you who don't know, a deep state is basically a shadow group of influential people that try to, shape global outcomes. And I know I made it sound very CIA and secret agency like, but that is probably the definition. And there are people who believe that definitely some of that exists pulling strings in the shadow. So why I feel that the deep state of was involved was because India's rise as any kind of power not only hurts China or Pakistan, it also reshapes the balance across the world. India is growing in soft power these days. They have diplomatic channels that they access which they did not have earlier, and there have been many evidences of such things, especially when the Indian government got back its citizens from war affected countries, or used due process and diplomatic charm to get somebody accused of a crime out of a jail in another country. These are instances which show that India now has soft power, and that is not something that the other powerful nations of the world want. So any kind of wrongdoing that India appears to be doing on the world stage diminishes that power, that diplomatic edge that they certainly have, and because of that, they would be profiteering. Secondly, it is also widely believed that the deep state, whether it be military agencies in any countries, Asian, European, American, or influential business entities, they often profiteer from conflicts because weapons are moved in conflicts and they almost become currency. So any stoke of flames towards an out and out military conflict certainly gives weapon manufacturers and buyers space to go and sell their products, and I think that is why they could certainly have been involved. Now, moving on to the third and final reason, which I feel could be a big one, and I think this might explain why most of the things happened that Pakistan did, which is plain old strongman politics. You see, when you are in a country where a lot of things are going wrong, where the economy is absolutely trash, where there is high unemployment, where safety and security is diminishing with every passing year, and where the country openly identifies as not having access to basic facilities like electricity, which most developing nations also take for granted these days, the best political move is often to have an external enemy and blame everything on it. See, when you stand up to aggression, especially external, you unite your people in a way that you could not with any other reason. And that is something that Pakistan has been doing for decades. Despite losing all major wars with India throughout their short history, the Pakistani public is so misinformed that they believe that they won all the wars. They literally lost one third of their country when India won and Bangladesh was born, yet they believe that they won that war. So it just shows you that not only is it a country which has a ton of misinformation, it is also a country where its people usually end up believing that misinformation. And this has resulted in some hilarious exchanges on social media in the last week or so, because you have mainstream Pakistani government channels posting videos out of a video game claiming to shoot down Indian jets. using edited images of, and mind you, poorly edited images of old aircraft crashes to say they struck Indian targets. Their defense minister claiming that the proof of their actions is all over social media, so their military doesn't need to give them. And blatantly people just believing things that just can't be possible, like they're destroying Pakistan's navy, destroying Patna port in India, which doesn't exist. Patna is far as far away from the ocean as probably you can be in India. So this just shows that strongman politics, which is basically being a person that stands up to military aggression of another country and says, we won't bow down despite being smaller, just rallies their people, and that is something that they keep doing. But the problem with that is that it has a very escalatory nature, which is what happened here today. Pakistan launched many attacks at Indian cities, civilian targets, with some claims even being that prominent religious centers like the Golden Temple were also targeted. Now, obviously, we can't confirm this, but I think the Indian government has confirmed that religious targets were targeted in other places. So, it just shows that the problem with strongman politics is you don't know when you are bluffing and when you might have to follow through on your threat. And I think that's what makes this situation very, very dangerous, because the primary factors that are driving this conflict are not coming from within the Pakistani people. They are coming from external forces. They are coming from their leaders who are using a brand of politics that works in the country despite having many, many issues across the board. Is it a Pakistan which is forging its own destiny, or is it one which is controlled by global superpowers, by external forces, or by leaders who are just not with their populace, who just want to stay in power? Well, whichever it is, thank you for watching the global game, and let us know, according to you, what were the reasons behind Pakistan's actions and what kind of future can India and Pakistan look at? And please subscribe to the global game for more content on things that matter.